Hello everyone, my name is Amaka and you're welcome to Lizama Stitches. In this tutorial, we are going to be learning how to make a transparent corset with yoke. Now this is a continuation of our previous tutorial on how to cut and sew a transparent corset. If you've not seen the drafting part of this tutorial, I'm going to leave the link of that video in the description box below so that you can check it out later. Registration for our corset class is ongoing. If you're interested, you can contact us with the number on the screen. So let's get started. I've cut out my fabric. Now this is the front panel and this is the back panel. This was cut on fold and I've added my seam allowance on it. On the yoke, I didn't add seam allowance to avoid gaping. For this one, this is the front yoke. I didn't add seam allowance on it to avoid gaping. For the center front, I added seam allowance by the side and it was cut on fold. These are my cups. I've added seam allowance all around my cups. For the side, I added seam allowance by the side and I have two of these. The yoke is one, this is one, and it was cut on fold. Now this is two, this is two, the yoke is also two. I have two of these. I'm going to show you how to couple your corset. So this is the cup. Now this is the center front. So this is how I'm going to join it. I'm going to place it this way and I'll sew with half-inch seam allowance and I'll sew this one with half-inch seam allowance. Before I do that, I'm going to iron interfacing on my fabric. So this is the front panel. Now this is how I'm going to join it. I'm going to place it this way and I'll sew with half-inch seam allowance and I'll sew this one with half-inch seam allowance. Take note, I doubled my mesh. So I have two of these fabrics here. So that is it with the front panel. So for the back, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to place this way. Now I'll place it right side facing right side and I'll sew with half-inch seam allowance. I'll sew it down. Now after sewing, I'm going to turn it to the other side and I'll fold in half-inch. I'm going to fold in half-inch and I'll sew it down. After sewing, you're not going to see the seam allowance on the wrong side and you're not going to see the seam allowance on the right side. The seam allowance will be inside. So I'm going to do all the things I've said and show you the outcome. For the front panel, this is my front panel. You can see that I doubled the mesh and the seam allowance is facing the right side of my fabric. So this is a cup. Now I have 4 of these here. 2 will serve as the main fabric while 2 will serve as the lining. I also have my ready-made bra cup here. I've shaped my cup. Now this cup, you know, at times when you buy these cups, some of them used to look flat. So for you to have that cupped effect, all you need to do is to shape it. I have a tutorial on how to do this. I'm going to leave the link of that video in the description box below so that you can check it out later. Now it has, when you do this, it's going to give you that cupped effect. The cup will be deep so that your corset, so that your bust will not be flat, will not look flat. So this is the back panel. Now if you check it, you see that you're not seeing the seam allowance from here and you're not seeing the seam allowance from here. And I also doubled the mesh. The next thing I'm going to do is to create my boning channels. This is the front panel. I've joined the front panel. Now take note, the seam allowance is facing the right side of the fabric, not on the wrong side. The next thing I'm going to do is to reduce the seam allowance. So I'm going to trim this down. After trimming down my seam allowance, now let me show you how to fix your boning channels. Now I have this strap here. Now this is 2 inches. This is 2 inches. So I'm going to fold it into 2. Now when I fold it into 2, I'm going to place it here just like this and I'm going to sew. And I'll turn it. I'll turn it this way and I'll top stitch. I'm going to top stitch. I'll sew on the tip. So the same way I'll do this one, I'm going to create one here. I'll create one here. And I'll create another one here and here. So I'm going to do it and show you the outcome. I'm going to do the same thing on the back panel. I'm going to create one here and I'll create another one here. So I'm going to do it and show you the outcome. Now for the cup. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to place my ready-made bra cup into the fabric just like this, and I will gum it. I'm going to use hemming gum. I'm going to gum it with hemming gum. But if you don't have hemming gum, you can actually use fabric gum. I'm going to do the same thing on the second cup. So I'll do it and show you the outcome. After sewing, this is what I have. I've fixed my boning channels. This is the front panel and this is the back panel. Now let me show you how to fix your yoke to your corset. So this is my cup. Now I've gummed the bra cup to the fabric. So let me show you how to fix your yoke to your corset. I'm going to reduce this foam a little so that I can see my seam allowance. Just a little. I'm going to start by working on the front panel. Now these are my cups. Now this is how the cups are supposed to be. They're supposed to be like this. And this is my yoke. Now this is how the yoke is supposed to be. Now this is the formation. So now I'm going to start by pinning my yoke to the cup. I'm going to place the yoke just like this, and I'll pin it down. Here I'm going to leave ½ inch here, which I'm going to use to join this to this. Now I'm going to mark that ½ inch. I'll mark it so that I'll be seeing what I'm doing. So for the sweetheart neckline, now this is where the sweetheart neckline stopped. And for this is where it stopped. I'm going to remove this while I work on the cups first. Okay, now let me show you what I'm going to do. So now this is how the yoke is supposed to be. I'm going to place the yoke on the cup this way and I'll pin it down. After pinning it down, I'm going to use the lining to cover it. I'll place it right side facing right side and I'll sew. I'm going to sew. I'm not going to sew this part. I'm going to use this part to join here. Now I'm going to remove this while I work on the cups and the yoke. So this is my ½ inch. Now I'm going to pin it to this part. Please just watch carefully. This is where the work is. So I'm going to pin this one. Now this is my ½ inch allowance which I marked. So I'm going to pin from here. So this is my lining. I'm also going to pin down my lining. Now I'm placing my lining right side facing right side. Now I'm pinning it down so that once I take it to my sewing machine, I'm going to sew. So this is the second lining. I'm going to pin it down. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew from here to here, and I'll sew from here to here. After sewing, I'll turn it. Now when I turn it, now take note, the yoke is going to be in between the lining and the main fabric. I'm not going to sew this part for now. I'm leaving this part. So after sewing, this is what I have. Now see how inside is. I had to sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I also did the same thing here. The next thing I'm going to do is to notch. I'm going to notch this part. Sorry, I've notched already. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to push the seam allowance on the lining and top stitch. I'm going to push this seam allowance on the lining and top stitch, and I'm going to do the same thing on this one. After that, I'm going to give this a thorough press and show you what it looks like. So after sewing and ironing, this is what I have. You see how neat this part is? You see how neat it is? Now let me show you how to attach it to your corset. When I take it to my sewing machine, the first thing I'm going to do is to join this part, the center front. I'm going to sew this part together. Now when I sew it, the seam allowance is going to be facing the right side of the fabric. After joining the center front, I'm going to sew this part. So I'm going to sew this part. Now let me turn it to the wrong side. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to sew it this way. When I take it to my sewing machine, I'm going to turn it this way, and I'll start by sewing the center front. So I'm going to sew this with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then I'll turn it this way and sew this side with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I'm sewing it. The seam allowance is going to be facing the right side of the fabric, and I'm going to do the same thing on this one. I'll sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew it this way, and the seam allowance will be facing the right side of the fabric. I hope you understood what I just said. Now let me explain again. Now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew it this way. I'll start by sewing the center front, then I'll sew the side, and I'll sew this side. Now as I'm sewing, the seam allowance is going to face the right side of the fabric. So I'll do it and show you the outcome. After sewing, now this is what I have. You can see that the seam allowance is facing the right side of the fabric. Now let me show you the next thing to do. Now take note, I'm going to cover this part with bias strips. Please take note, these straps were cut on bias. They were not cut straight. Don't cut them straight, cut them on bias. What I have here is 1.5 inches. My straps is 1.5 inches. I'm going to place it this way, and I'll sew. I'm going to sew it. I'll sew it to this point. Now after sewing, I'll cut off this excess, and I'll turn it this way. Now let me cut it off. Let me cut off this excess. So I'm going to cut off this excess, and I'll turn it this way. I'll fold this excess just to hide the seam, just to hide the rough edges, and I'll turn it just like this. Hope you're seeing what I'm doing. I'm just going to turn it, fold it this way, and I'll sew. So take note, I'm also going to use it to cover here, and I'm going to use this other one to cover here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it and show you the outcome. After sewing, this is what I have. You see how it is? Very neat. Now you're not seeing the seam allowance from anywhere. I've used this to tidy up this part. Now when you look at the right side, you're not seeing the seam allowance. You look at the wrong side, you're not seeing the seam allowance. The seam allowance, everything is inside. So that's how to do this. So that's how to make your transparent corset with yoke. The next thing I'm going to do is to bone it. So this is how I'm going to fix my boning. After fixing all my bonings, the next thing I'm going to do is this. Now I'll bring the back panel. So for the back panel, I'm also going to fix my boning. Then I'm going to create a boning channel here. I'm going to run a straight stitch, and I'll have a channel here which I'm going to fix my boning. Then by the side, I'm going to fix my eyelet. Then I'll run another straight stitch, which is going to also create another boning channel here. On this part, I'm going to have two bones. I'll fix one bone here, and my eyelet is going to be at the middle. For the back yoke, now I placed the back yoke wrong side facing wrong side, and I sewed. I sewed with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now when you turn it this way, the seam allowance is going to be facing the right side of the fabric. So you're going to have something like this. For the back panel, the seam allowance is facing the right side, and I'm still going to reduce this seam allowance because it's big. So the same way I created these boning channels, that's how I'm going to create a boning, something like a boning channel here. but the only difference is I'm not going to bone it. So I'm going to do something like this here. For the lower part, this is how I'm going to sew it. I'm going to sew from the wrong side and I'll turn it to the right side. Let me illustrate with pin. So I'm going to sew it this way. I'll take it to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew it this way. I'll sew it down to the end of this lower part. And I'll turn it. I'll turn the seam allowance to the right side. I'll fold it to the right side and I'll top stitch. So I'm going to do it to this point. And I'm also going to do the same thing here. I'll sew it and turn it to the right side. So this is my corset. Now you see the wrong side. You're not seeing the seam allowance from anywhere. You see how neat it is. And this is the wrong side. This is the right side. I've also joined the shoulder. You see how it is. So this is my corset. Now I've fixed the button and I've also fixed the eyelets. Now for the neck, I'm not done with this corset. I'm going to bead the neck. I'm going to embellish it. This is a complete dress. This is a dress, but I just want to show you how to make the upper part, to make a transparent corset with yoke. A neatly finished transparent corset with yoke. So that's just it with this tutorial. You see my corset, you see how neat my corset is, you see how neat the yoke is. You're not seeing the seam allowance from the wrong side and you're not seeing it from the right side. I'm going to wear it on my mannequin for you to see what it looks like. We have a class on how to make corsets. If you're interested, you can contact us with the number on the screen. If you found this tutorial helpful, please click on the like button. Share this video with your friends. Share this video in your sewing groups. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so. Feel free to ask questions. I'll be in the comment section to answer all your questions. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.